Hey guys, Monochrome here. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. Genuinely good to have you. Today we're going to take a look at another controversial topic. And this is one that maybe some of you haven't thought of, but some of you might have. Because if you're interested in self-defense, it's just natural to do research into what people in the past carried, used, or relied on. And going back many decades, yes, there were individuals, especially in urban centers, who relied on a straight razor, not just for shaving their whiskers, but for self-defense. And let's be realistic, some unsavory types who relied on a straight razor for not self-defense, but still used it against other people. So, how good was it really? Well, I'll tell you guys right now, with the research I've done into the past, and the reason why a lot of men chose this as their concealed self-defense option is because, well, some of them had criminal records, and because of that, they couldn't legally get a gun. And the other options, pretty limited. Decades upon decades ago, we're talking 1920s, 1930s, 40s, 50s, and even earlier than the 1920s. So, why was this sometimes chosen? Well, first of all, it's sharp. Secondly, very readily available. You could purchase it pretty much anywhere back in the day. Also, even though it's quite long, it is somewhat narrow and it is very thin. So carrying it all day long, not really an issue at all. And again, very sharp. However, today we're going to cover the top 5 reasons why this is a very bad choice nowadays. Please keep in mind that back in the good old days, there weren't a lot of options out there. So something like this, well, it looked appealing, but nowadays, no. So in no particular order, top 5 reasons why an old-fashioned straight razor carried for self-defense is a very bad idea. First of all, this thing is designed for shaving. So it is going to have no tip. It's either going to be rounded like this vintage model from the Soviet Union, or it's just going to be straight slab-sided, no tip at all. And I have mentioned this in the past that I do have training in knife combatives, and because of that, I don't recommend using knives as modern-day self-defense options. But with a knife, there might be times, if you've chosen that as your option, where you might need to use the tip. Well, this has no tip. All you have is a cutting edge, so you're already limited. That's number 1 in no particular order. Number 2, no lock mechanism. None. A lock mechanism is a safety feature. And the last thing you want to do is pull out something like this against someone who perhaps has a better cutting tool than you do. And yeah, there is no lock mechanism on these things. None. And as you can see, yeah, they open up to quite a bit all the way around. Again, no lock mechanism. I've seen one very old self-defense manual that claims to teach razor fighting, in which you hold it like this, and instead of a pair of brass knucks, well, you got a razor sharp cutting edge. Yeah, the only problem is this thing swings freely. Now, on my particular example, the rotation is a little stiff, but on quite a few straight razors, it's loose. But even though it's a bit stiff on my example, yeah, there's no way I trust this. Now, you could place your thumb here on the rear, and that does seem to hold it in place. But using this like this is awkward. And there's no jimping back here, so your thumb could slip off. This could come down on your thumb. Not good. Another possible technique is to take your index finger, jam it in there like that, and then push down here on your thumb. Now that is surprisingly secure. However, again, using it is awkward. And there is the possibility that depending on how hard and fast you're going with a potential attacker, you might end up breaking your index finger. Yeah, so even though this hand position is very secure, wow, is this awkward to use. So yeah, no lock. And I do remember something from my research many years ago in which an individual advocated using the little finger instead of the index finger as an improvised lock mechanism. Yeah, no, that's stupid. Your little finger is not strong at all. Yeah, no. And I can't figure out what sort of position with a straight razor you would use in which you would use your little finger as the improvised lock mechanism instead of your index finger. So yeah, no, never rely on your little finger as an improvised lock. That's not going to work. Okay, third issue, the image that these things have. Nowadays, they're looked at as something that a much older gentleman or perhaps a hipster trying to be ironic would use for shaving. But I guarantee you, you use something like this and the police, judges, and courts are not going to look favorably upon you because these things have an old world punk image. These were used by street thugs. Maybe street thugs or former street thugs who carried them for self-defense. Maybe. But these things, outside of shaving your face, they have a very old punk image. You carry something like this, you use it, you're a punk from back in the day. I mean, as much as gun control advocates will never admit this, the thing with a handgun carried for self-defense is that even the most die-hard anti-gun advocate can see a respectable person using certain types of guns for self-defense. You could, for example, imagine seeing a doctor on his day off, possibly being violently mugged, thinking he's going to be badly physically injured, pulling out something like a Smith & Wesson Model 36, an old-fashioned small 38 special revolver, pointing it at the bad guys and shouting at them to leave him alone, to get back. Yeah, even the most die-hard gun control advocate can picture a respectable, decent man using certain types of guns for self-defense. This? Oh, hell no. Hell no. No. Okay, fourth issue. This is made for shaving your face. And that is a low impact activity. There is nothing extreme about shaving. So because of that, the handles on the vast majority of these things tend to be very thin, very flexible, hollow plastic, as you can see. Straight through, hollow, very thin, very flexible, just plastic. Right here, there's a back spacer, but that's mostly there for the pin. There's a pin here that goes through the blade. And yeah, that's about it. 2 little pins. These handles are flimsy as hell. Now, seeing someone use a razor in the movies is one thing. That's acting. In real life, I mean, these handles can easily break. These pins can easily break as well, especially on an older model straight razor like this one. And then what happens? Well, guess what's coming down on your fingers? Or the palm of your hand? Yeah. I mean, that's not a knock against straight razor manufacturers back in the day. These were made, the vast majority of them, for the common man. And these did not require metal liners in the handles or anything like that. Low impact, just, yeah. These handles were good enough. They got the job done. They were just wide enough to keep the blade from coming through this end and cutting the user. But these handles weren't made for a violent physical altercation. No. These can break apart. The pins can break apart, especially on these older models. And then you're going to have some problems with that blade coming down on your hand or your fingers. I mean, granted, that might not seem like a huge issue, but it's still huge enough to make the top five. And the last one. Some of these old fashioned straight razors are actually worth money. Now, this one isn't, but there are some out there that collectors will happily buy. And there you are, maybe a hipster self defense practitioner walking around with one of these as your chosen self defense tool. And meanwhile, it could be worth hundreds of dollars, maybe even more. You guys would be surprised what the prices are on some of these straight razors, especially the ones in mint or near mint condition. So, yeah, that's another reason. And this is definitely an old-fashioned one because it has an actual blade. Newer ones, this blade portion isn't a blade. It butterflies open. There's two halves, and in the middle, you insert a single-edged razor blade. And then you close up the two halves around it, and you use that single-edged replaceable razor blade. That's what happens on the newer models. Now, why does that exist? Because of AIDS. Yeah. AIDS came into being, and barbershops can't have old-fashioned straight razors being used on one client after another, no matter how well they clean them, how well they disinfect them. No. So AIDS ruined the old-fashioned single-edged straight razor. For individual customers who want to shave with them in their home as a private purchase item, yeah, no problem. No one's sharing your straight razor. Barber shops, no, can't be doing that anymore. So there is a newer design out there. Again, this portion butterflies open. You put a single-edged, old-fashioned thin razor blades in between the two halves, close them up, and that's what you use for shaving customers. Well, with that, you have a different disadvantage. I mean, imagine trying to use one of the newer ones against a violent attacker, and you're basically using a box cutter that's not quite as secure when it comes to holding the blade as an actual box cutter. So this, depending on how hard you hit your attacker with the cutting edge, could butterfly open, and there goes the blade flying out, maybe hitting you or falling down onto the ground, and now you have an absolutely useless self-defense tool. So, yeah. As far as these things go, guys carried and used them for self-defense purposes so many decades ago, maybe 100 years ago or more, because there weren't a lot of options. There just weren't. So something like this, to a lot of guys, looked appealing. And if you did end up using something like this to defend yourself, chances are you weren't going to switch to something better because, hey, This is what I used. It worked. I'm going to keep carrying and using it. But all the guys from back in the day, let's be honest, they've passed away from old age if they even lived that long. So for some of you out there researching self-defense options, especially the ones that existed way back in the day, like 100 years ago in the 1920s, keep in mind, there were very limited options. So this looked viable. This looked good. It's not anymore. There are a lot better options out there. And again, as someone with knife combatives training, I do not advocate using a bladed weapon for self-defense. If you can get a concealed carry permit and a small frame pistol, do it, get training. If you can't, second best option is pepper spray. And again, get training. Okay, guys, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this top 5 video. I'll see you soon. Please continue to stay safe out there. Yes, it is still dangerous, unfortunately.